guys about is pride and humility. You know, humility is what ultimately allows you to be all that Christ wants you to be. Not what you want Christ to have you be, but what Christ wants you to be. Because you can't do anything without humility. You came to Christ in the first place because of humility. See, you can't come to God without humility. You can't love other people without humility. You can't resolve problems without it. You can't communicate with other people without it. You can't be an effective witness for Christ without humility. You can't do anything without humility. Like I said in the first place, you came to Christ because of humility. Because you realize your situation, that we're dead in trespasses and sins. So that's what brought you to Christ. Him humbling you, making you realize that you can't come to Christ by your own means. Like it says in, I'm not going to read maybe a lot of verses. I'm not going to ask you to look for all of them, but I'm just going to read some and have you guys look for other ones. It says in Ephesians 4, 1-2, as a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. See, humility and pride, they're like water and oil. They can't coexist with each other. Because pride is the opposite of humility. And is one of the most loathed sins in God's sight. Look at Proverbs 16:5. The Lord detests the proud of heart. It doesn't say the Lord detests the prideness of people. It doesn't say that He hates the sin. It says that He actually detests the person that's prideful. Because you see, pride is like an epidemic vice. It's just like an infection, something contagious. It just takes over all your body and manifests itself in many ways. I mean, whether any one of us wants to admit it or not, we all have pride. See, the question is not, do I have pride? The question is, how much of it do I have? And where is it? So you can deal effectively with it. But if you want to deal effectively with pride, you have to look at it the way God looks at it. Because pride is a sin. See, it's not just like some whatever thing before God. It's a sin. And no sin can exist before a holy God. Now, here's what God says about the proud person. It's in Proverbs 26:12. Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. I mean, through the Bible we see so many different types of pride. Pride of possession, you know, the Pharisees, they love to have the best places. They invited them and they were like, oh, Rabbi. They would like kiss their rings and stuff, and they would sit in the best places. Ability, achievement, Daniel 4:22. When we're talking about King Nebuchadnezzar here, he was the king of Babylon, you know, who had conquered most of the whole known world by then. It says, Daniel 4:22, it is you, O king, who have grown and become strong. For your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the end of the earth. This is the same guy that one day just saw his whole empire. He was like, man, just look at everything I've accomplished. And then was when God actually passed a judgment on him. So he would learn who is God. Because you see, pride, like I told you, it's a sin. But even beyond that, pride seeks to on God. I don't know if you get that. But it's kind of like making yourself more sovereign than God. Because you see, pride has like two sides to it. When we think about pride, we always think, oh, it's just like thinking yourself better than others. But pride is like a coin. One side you have thinking yourself better than others or better than God. And in the other side, it's just self-pitying yourself. You know, the time, oh, why didn't you give me this? Like, I deserve it, you know, for me, for that. You hear it everywhere. See, you hear apostles saying that all the time, you know, making Jesus like an accessory, like after all you already have, you have to add him to have eternal life. When he's not an accessory, he's not a pendant. I mean, He's all you need. See, we never, still talking about pride, we never see the Bible saying, "No, come on, you're thinking too far of yourself. You have to think more of yourself. That's what you gotta do." Do we ever see the Bible saying that? I mean, time after time after time, whenever there's pride, whenever you see someone, like you see, like, for example, Nebuchadnezzar, God gave him that authority, that power. But he started kind of trying to seek independence or control. So time after time, whenever there's just a little bit of pride, God crushes that person and humbles that person so that they can admit that God is God. So in short, a prideful person believes that they, in and of themselves, are or should be the source of what is good, right, and worthy of praise, and even what is fair. Because many times when something bad happens to us, we're like, that's not fair. How can God be a God of love if blah, 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 this and this happens? What are some manifestations of pride? Complaining against God, lack of gratitude, anger, seeing yourself as better or lower than someone else, than others, talking too much about yourself, seeking independence or control, and being consumed with what others think. See, there's so many more. I mean, pride is self-worship. To put it in another way, it's idolatry. And that is a sin. You shall have no other gods before me. When you are prideful, which is what I told you, it's like a coin. Being prideful, lifting yourself up or lifting yourself down. Pride is everything that has to do only with you. Just asking for things for yourself. I want this is for me, I deserve this. When in reality, you don't serve anything. It says in Isaiah 64:6 that our righteousness are like filthy rags. We're like leaves, we pass away, we fade away, we're dust. Being prideful, to summarize it, is trying to put a leash on God and thinking yourself more sovereign than Him, thinking that you can tell Him what to do, what to think, and how to do His will in your life. So, what to do if you're prideful, which you are, I am. The first step to true repentance is seeing pride for what it really is, what I was telling you, seeing it through God's eyes. The second step is to put on humility. Now, our greatest example, obviously, is Jesus. Just this whole fact of Him coming to earth was humility at its maximum level. And we're going to see that in Philippians 2:6-8. You can look that through. It says, who, being in the form of God, did not consider robbery to be equal with God, but making himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, and coming in the likeness of men, and being found in appearance as a man, He humbled Himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. What are we reading here? I mean, you have God who is given pure worship, who is in majesty in heaven, His whole sovereignty, stripping Himself of all that to come and die for sinners, utterly lost and dead like you and me. That fact alone should humble every single one of us here. But if we want to go even further on what Jesus did, we see Himself being God, completely submissive to the Father's will, even Him being God. And we see that in John 4:34. I'll read it for you. Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of Him who sent me and to finish His work. John 8:28-29. Then Jesus said to them, when you lift up the Son of Man, which is when He was going to be crucified, then you will know that I am He, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father taught me, I speak these things. And He who sent me is with me. The Father has not left me alone, for I always do those things that please Him. I mean, we're going to get even deeper to what he did. You see, John 17:1. I have glorified you on the earth. I have finished the work which you have given me to do. Even before he died, he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was saying, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. But not my will, but your will be done. Mark 10:43-45. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So you see, first Jesus set the example, and then he tells us, follow my example. I was humble. I followed the Father all throughout my life. He's telling us that in Romans 12 too, because we must have the perspective of Christ and not the world's perspective. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We always read that verse like we just pass it through. But do you notice anything in all those verses we have read? That you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God, not your will, His will. We have another act of Christ's humility in John 13:1-17, where he watches his disciples speak. See, in those times, the lowly slave were the ones who did that. Because over there they just had sandals and they walk along. They had like dust and everything on their feet. So the lowly servant, let's say they had a monkey and they had a servant. They would sell the monkey for like, $1 million, and they would send the slave for 2 pennies. So Jesus did the job that the lowly servant would do. He set examples for the disciples. And yet, those are some of his demonstrations of humility. Besides Jesus, there are so many examples in the Bible of men who humbled themselves like to the dirt. You have Moses, John the Baptist, Mary, the tax collector that beat his breast. He was like, have mercy on me, I'm a sinner. He wouldn't even lift his eyes to God. But before getting to those people, let's go a little deeper on what Christ actually did on the cross. Now, I'm going to say something that it might not fit really well for you, for some of you. God doesn't owe anyone salvation. Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. God owes no one salvation. He could have been just as just and loving and merciful to send every single one of us to hell. Does that scare you? Does that kind of stir up a little something there? The fact is that He chose to give sinners a way to be saved. That's grace. That's mercy, that's grace. But that makes God sovereign, completely sovereign. And just the fact that He provided for a way of sinners to become saved should humble you and should make you look for the will of God, not your own.